history maybe was written incorrectly or changed by the winners. So they say, oh, there's a lot of things that we will never know. But when it comes to, that leads us right into where we're going. When it comes to things like science, we have so much fact, we've got a lot of hope, and then we're trying to do really big things somewhere in between there. And so hopefully, even in the future, as far as technology, as far as like basic science, I'm hoping that computers are doing it. I'm hoping that we have robots doing much of it, which is already happening. A lot of it's being automated because as long as there's money, there is the desire to change outcomes. There's the desire to get a grant. There is the desire to make the paper better than maybe the outcome really is. And this showed recently in how many scientific papers were not reproducible. And that's dangerous stuff, because this is the technology that we're building on. I put technology into my body based on a bunch of scientific papers, and then went back to find out that, when whatever humans are involved, there might not be perfect science. Now, I still believe in the authors that were behind the telomerase induction and the myostatin inhibitors. I think that vastly people are good and do the right thing, but that could have had a pretty bad outcome if you just had a bunch of people wanting to get a grant, get funding because their lives depend on money. And then there you are in a situation where, how good is this science? So, there are a lot of, humans are the dreamers, but I think automation is the way to really exact output, and to try not, we shouldn't really be, I'm forming this thought because I wasn't thinking about this before we got on this call, trying not to belittle how we've built up society. But the problem is if you have a heavy reliance on money, people will do crazy things for money, and streamlining the process of science and giving then money even to people with failed experiments is probably going to be very important in the future. Failed experiment in a university is it's as important as the experiments that show some evidence to benefit for humans, because now the failing of the experiment has to be reproducible too. But without knowing all of the things that failed, we're just doomed to continue to reproduce bad science, not sharing information and not sharing what doesn't work. So what doesn't work, I would say, is equally as important as what does. And some of this ties in because robots and these little technologies that we're using at home now, obviously there's big automated scientific technologies that can help take, the human element out of developing innovation. Science is one thing, innovation is another, and innovation needs to be really streamlined and scaled. Like you make gene therapy, you want to make gene therapy for 7 billion people, you want to make sure everybody's getting a good quality product, right?
Yeah. I think that data science kind of is able to start filling in those gaps with respect to human error in such big ways that you really don't have to worry about that as much as we did. But it is ultimately, if you want to scale that up, you can't. You don't want to see those any margin of error there. It makes me think of. It makes me think of these a few developments with understanding dead languages. There have been data science applications for actually going back and answering some unanswered questions about these languages, and just that huge amount of data and that huge amount of computing power is able to be crunching the numbers in a lot of different disciplines more and more. And the most crucial of those is certainly in emerging biomedicine. That's where that's where we can really be helping people, and that's where you are really really helping people.
Yeah, and remember though, I mean, you can't spin something out of nothing. So if somebody tells you, they can run a bunch of algorithms and see outside of small molecules, where vastly we know how they hook up to cells and how they work intrinsically. As far as new technology, the biological outcomes have to still be put into those data sets. And so I think that it is really interesting. I think that obviously computing power is going to vastly push us forward and help to increase innovation. But you still have to put good data in order to get anything meaningful out. And so, that's where we're sitting right now, which is probably a good leeway into BioViva, is we have essentially pivoted. We're a data science company, and we're holding the most important human data on the planet, which is how do people perform under regenerative gene therapies. And so how are these people's bodies different now, and what different doses do we need to look at, and what different genes do we need to look at in order to improve upon the human condition? What will it take to make a human body that is impervious to disease and minor injury? So this is a really important place, and this is where we have decided to go. But we know that the data that we collect and analyze from patients, and how that goes into what eventually will be a big data set, which is not now, has to be really clean. It's got to be as clean as possible, or else it doesn't help, right? And vastly, the biomarkers of aging, which is distinctly what we look at. We look at the hallmarks of aging, and we look at aging in general because it has implications to young and old. The biomarkers of that are not really set. We're basically on new horizons for what does it actually mean to age. So we know it's an accumulation of damage. We know 9 hallmarks of aging. We know that there are, epigenetic changes, and those are vastly being looked at with the Horvath clocks and other clocks. But putting it all together is a big it's a big job, and putting it cleanly together is the most important thing. Not hiding any data, not using bad, unclean data. And so this is where we're going to be at, and we're going to be here for a while. And this big pivot actually ended up helping us deliver on our biggest mission, which was actually to get therapeutics to people. We needed to sort of pivot away from that, let somebody else take over and do what we do best, which is analyzing the data. So that's a really long answer to a question.
No, I mean, your company has done such incredible work and such an incredible suite of services. So I'm reminded of some of the products that your company, your suite of products, the MyFit gene, the full genome. So in your last interview, you teased a new product suite and said that maybe somebody like myself, I might wait to see what that one holds. Is there anything that you could tell us about that? What's your advice for a guy like me as far as getting more into this personalized genomics?
Yeah, so learning about yourself. So learning about yourself is really exciting. It's really fun, and you can go to a lot of different companies to do that. So what we're doing right now is we're probably, I think in November, we'll be launching our multi-omics repository. So regardless of whether you went with us or you went with another company to get your genomic data, your microbiome data, maybe you've got some blood work sitting around, maybe you've got some metabolome data, we're going to encourage people to get involved with us and upload all of that data, because dealing with aging it's a multi-pronged issue. So it's not just your genome. So your genome plays into, obviously, we're all born and we all have aging over time, and then we die from various diseases. And actually the diseases, if we live long enough, are quite predictable what we will die of. So there is no mystery there. But as far as diseases that are offshoots, like monogenic diseases and things like that, your genome can show you. And genome is going to help us vastly create precision medicine. And it'll help us understand if somebody takes a regenerative gene therapy, whether it's a telomerase, a klotho, a myostatin inhibitor, a PGC1 alpha, or one of these sort of genes. It will help us understand who performs better under which gene therapies, and who might need a larger dose and who might need less of a dose of the technology. So looking at human data in general, we kind of know how it all ends for most people. We've got some outliers, the supercentenarians, and they seem to have better health for longer. They're older longer, but they have less complications over that period of time. Well, that's something to look at. But we're most interested in essentially helping us step into the future and become more than that. Not predisposed to the condition of aging to begin with.
Let me ask you something. If in some future administration, if you were the Surgeon General or in a similar role of this kind, what would you do with respect to the regulatory bodies and the FDA to see that the most people are living well and living as long as they want to be? How would you find a balance there in the regulation versus the advancing things down the pipeline as quickly as possible?
Oh boy, that's a great question, because a lot of people think that, I'm very much against the regulatory services, and I'm not. I think there's a definite place for the regulatory services. Everybody wants safe drugs. We don't have any safe drugs, but everybody wants safe drugs. I mean, people die taking their prescriptions every day. In the United States and all over the world, unfortunately, taking them as prescribed. But outside of that, so we can't pretend that life is safe. Life isn't super safe. But regulatory does give us the ability to create safer drugs and make sure that they actually work before they get to humans. So I think that the regulatory body is fine. It needs to loosen its grip a little bit. It needs to ensure that drugs can be developed without $1 billion price tag. That's not really working, and there's ways to work around that. What I would like to see in the United States, I would like my company to be part of that if it could. I would like to see an advanced right to try bill. So right now, the right to try bill is vastly flawed. It doesn't really give people the ability to partake in things like gene therapies that are vastly still considered experimental medicine. It does let people partake in drugs that have gone through phase 1 testing, but they might have failed in phase 1 testing. Many of these gene therapies have not gone through that. So I would like to have a right to try, sort of an autonomy and agency where people can participate in experimental therapeutics under consent, so they understand what they're consenting to. Medical doctors understand that they're consenting to give a treatment, and giving the people the ability to choose for themselves what to participate in. And that all of that data, unlike right to try, is actually used to gauge how well the drug works. So there's 2 paths in the United States. One of the paths to innovative drugs takes about as much paperwork as getting a drug into a trial, and many of the patients die before they get access to these advanced therapeutics. The other one is right to try. But in order to protect the company, if somebody's terminally ill and they say, I want to use your drug because I'm terminally ill, the company doesn't have to report on how the drug worked or if the patient died. And actually, it's really important information. Now, a terminally ill patient is likely to die, much more likely percentage-wise to die than anyone else. But whether they did die or not and how well they performed until they did die is really important information. And so I think that both routes to getting hold of innovative technologies that haven't gone through the regulatory system is just too difficult right now in the United States. And that's what I would like to see opened up. I believe that people should have agency and autonomy to use drugs that they want to. And then on the other side, I think that you should have the right to live, or the right to try, and the right to die. So I think that we should have a federal law that if people are not interested in living anymore, especially as we start to create human bodies that will live longer and longer. I think that people should have the right to both of those things in a humane, safe environment. So that's probably what I would do is I would change the regulatory body to be a little bit more meaningful. High price doesn't mean high safety, and so we need to reduce the price and get more companies through. But we have the ability right now to basically streamline a whole bunch of people through innovative new technologies by consent that would expedite the development of these drugs by decades.
Mm-hmm. People within the transhumanist party and techno-optimist circles, they sometimes refer to a concept of longevity escape velocity, an idea that people might be approaching a point where a death is not something that is occurring as a matter of course, and we see certainly in companies like yours and in your work the beginnings of something like that. Do you have any observations on inroads to a society that can support that? Do you see what is your most ambitious hope with respect to gene therapy and public health?
Wow, that is a really good question. I should have read your questions before, but I feel like I don't like to do that because I'm not as spontaneous. Well, I mean, that actually is quite a broad thing that you asked me. So there's longevity escape velocity. Well, we have to prove that we can do that. And so, right now we work on increasing health spans. And so by increasing health spans, you just, you continue to push that back. So science has already done that. We're living longer than we ever have before, and we're living better than we ever have before. And so this technology is just going to expand on that and per natural course. And I'm trying to get around the whole thing you asked because it was a little bit more vague to me. But I'd like to see that incorporated into life. I think that when people have more time, they make better decisions. But as a society, in order to really in order for us to really live long and well, we have to learn to get along better. And I can't stress that more. And that has to do with taking care of the environment and taking care of each other. So, we want our environment to be robust. If people want to get to outer space and to different planets, they really need to learn from this biome, how things are going here and how you actually do create new technology on other planets. So we need, but vastly taking care of one another is really important too, because I don't know, I just see some crazy things, people infighting, not taking care of each other, bickering, and this is probably a part of the evolution of humans, is to look towards genetics and see what is it with us that make us
these kind of we don't want to amplify those transactional concerns.
Yeah, we need to not be cruel. We need to be really supportive. Our company supports every other company that's in longevity. We've supported everyone out there that is in the common interest of making the world a better place. And I think that people, again, are mostly good, but there's a little bit of non-supporting and a lot of shaming that goes on that is really, you're either too fat, you're too skinny, you're too this, you're too goddamn that. I'm just kind of, I think we have to get over that. That's part of the evolution, right? Because those are not intelligent things to do. So I think that, in order to really support the longevity escape velocity that you're talking about, we really have to become better people for each other. And it's like flexing a muscle of complement. We need to get out there and we need to do good both for the environment and for each other. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. My mom has been a type 1 diabetic for her entire adult life. And so over the years, I've seen newer and newer iterations of insulin pumps. Some of them prototypes and some that are coming to market now, basically approaching an artificial pancreas. Mm-hmm. My mother's not a young woman anymore. She's 60. And Do you think that advancements in genomics might be able to see her well again? You know, setting aside the artificial pancreas thing. Do you think? How do you think that your work with regenerative medicine might keep her from having to endure some drastic surgical interventions or other things? Can I tell her that there's hope for her?
Well, there's a couple of things here. There is really good technology that has been tried to be passed through the U.S. before. It's very expensive, and I think that some of these things could have been passed a long time ago. One company is Biosite. They have a capsule that they put under the skin, and it actually performs well in patients for about a year, that they don't need insulin injections. And insulin is the sixth most expensive liquid in the United States. People are dying because they can't get their hands on it. And Biosite was performing really well, I believe, in trials here. They ended up moving their trials to the EU for whatever reasons. And I'm hoping that that comes out, and that's something that your mom can use. And so that's something that goes under your skin, and it lasts for about a year, and it delivers your insulin at normal levels that humans need. The other thing is there was technology actually many years ago where they were taking stem cells, making beta and islet cells, putting them into the liver of humans, and they were off of insulin for years at a time. See, the liver is immune privilege, so the immune system doesn't attack it. So for anyone who doesn't know about type 1, so type 1 is not like type 2. It's not aging associated or diet associated. It's an autoimmune disorder. So in this autoimmune disorder, your immune system starts to target the beta cells in the pancreas, the beta and the islet cells that create insulin, and it destroys them, and your body needs insulin. Otherwise, insulin is just in your veins, and your cells can't actually use it. So it's kind of like a doorkeeper. It knocks on the door and it says insulin here, and then the cell opens the door and takes the insulin in. And without insulin, the sugar builds up in the body and people go into comas. And with too much insulin, the patient dies. So my son has type 1 diabetes, and I had spent a few years studying regenerative medicines with stem cells, with working for a nonprofit. And then my son was diagnosed with type 1, and that's really what spun me into looking at genetics. What can I tell you about genetics? I can tell you that the immune system is very difficult, and we don't know how to modulate the immune system safely now. The first view that we can modulate the immune system to target things that we want it to target is the cancer therapies. So the CAR T therapies are the ones where they're actually modulating the immune system to attack certain tissues like cancer. As far as resetting the immune system so that it's not attacking an organ, we vastly do not know how to do that yet. So what I can tell you is that we should already have access to better technology than these pumps. My son is also on a pump, and he has high and low blood sugars all day long. I don't know if I have an example right now because it's midday, but you can see what his blood sugar looks like over the day and night. It is going up and down, and twice last night it went into the red, and I had to give him juice, or else he could die in his sleep. So it's a very serious condition. So modulating the immune system with gene therapy, yeah, probably down the road. But once the immune system has already picked a target, it's really hard to reset it. And some people have actually hypothesized completely resetting the immune system where you wipe it clean and start over. But that's also a dangerous thing to do because that means like even cold viruses that you've already seen, it's as if you've never seen them. And so, you might take it pretty hard, right? The immune system is a brilliant, brilliant mechanism, but the immune system can also kill you. And so that is not the outcome that we're looking for. So what I could tell you to tell her is there are better technologies out there. For some reason, they're having a very hard time getting to clinical trials or getting through clinical trials. And I am excited about these artificial these artificial like pump technologies that they have, and those actually starting to work more like an artificial pancreas. So how that would happen is your blood sugar would feed back into the pump, and then your pump would either give you more or less insulin based on how much sugar you had in your blood. And it's pretty brilliant because I wish we were farther with type 1 diabetes, but because it might be really brilliant technology for other things that we need to do as we live much longer and travel to maybe different planets in the universe and things like that. This type of technology certainly will build on itself, and it might turn into a feeding station if people are near cryonically stored for trips for long distances and things like that. So knowing how to keep organs going is the benefit of all these people with chronic disease right now, but I would much rather see a cure or a curative type treatment that takes them off this roller coaster of, oh no, I got a unit too much insulin and now I'm sweating here and I can't do anything with my friends because I can't even stand up, to, oh no, now my blood sugar is so high because I took sugar for that now I've got a stomach ache and it's just we need to prioritize this chronic disease and vastly aging and childhood disease. They're all chronic diseases.
Mm-hmm. In talking about the best public health outcomes, you're somebody who has an incredible wealth of knowledge in not just emerging biomedicine, but I think emerging technology in the landscape of businesses therein. In talking about the best public health outcomes, are there other related disciplines that you see as maybe being very more aligned with your work than others? I think of nanotechnology or brain computer interfaces. Do you see any of these things sort of helping to leapfrog forward with respect? What are your musings on these related disciplines as it relates to making genomics the best that we possibly could?
Well, I think that we know from the past that all of these technologies piggyback on the success of one another. And so, we need faster computers and we need better AI type systems to be coded in. We need better repositories for information. We need better medical devices for humans. Some of these medical devices that they use for type 1, people are using to be in optimal health, like, the blood glucose monitoring systems. But, stronger, faster, smarter is always better in every one of the fields. And that's why, we vastly, we don't choose well, we wouldn't have much bad to say about any technology developing because we don't know if that technology will eventually save our lives or our children's lives or humanity in general at some point in the future. And so, obviously all of the computing speed, these new talk of quantum computers and computers programmed in vastly different ways. Mixing biologics with computers is very interesting. I think we'll eventually integrate our technology into our bodies. Hopefully some of it will become biological, symbiotic, unrecognizable sources of technology and intertwined into us. But it really takes all of the science to develop. So, if you were in a position and you say we had to cut funding to something, what would you cut? You're cutting your left arm off or your right arm off with any of those decisions.
Yeah. Can you point to anything in the maybe in broad terms if necessary, where if you said if we had faster computing power, if we were able to crunch more numbers, we would be able to do X or Y already, but there's limitations with the state of data science there? probably 100 things anyway.
I suppose, yeah, we could go on a witch hunt, but we've done other things that, that have, I mean, we might as well not start there. That's in the grim area. I mean, we a long time ago, for various reasons, generally the myths that we live by, we stifled innovation in a bunch of ways. And so now it's just vastly opening it up. So, one of the areas of gene therapy that, we hit a wall in, I was not involved in gene therapy at that year, but in 1999, there was a death, a very highly publicized death from gene therapy. And it was an incredibly sad account of probably a person, obviously, who should not have been taking a gene therapy and took a vector in which his immune system reacted to. And that one death shut down gene therapy for about 20 years. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that the risk aversion that happens ends up killing millions of people.
Yes. Yeah.
Every year, if you cut out other diseases, which are just as important to me, because I actually got into this technology to cure childhood disease. I was just so completely distraught by what I saw in Children's Hospital after working several years in the stem cell education forum. What I saw that we didn't at that time even use stem cell technology because it was considered too risky and experimental, and yet children were dying. I am so fraught with that you step forward and you look at the risk aversion. Just aging alone, if you cut out all of those childhood diseases, kills 40 million people a year. So we just stopped a technology because one person died, and yet every day people die taking their drugs as prescribed, but they feel okay with that because of some other myth that they live by, that, that's just the way things go, or that's logical, or this was a legal drug to get hold of and the other one maybe wasn't. Well, the other one would have been by now if that wasn't the case. And so our risk aversion really is really, it's actually literally killing us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and it brings to mind a thinking that people have around self-driving cars and the trolley problem, constantly talking about the trolley problem. But the fact is that there's 35,000 people a year dying from human error in this. And by having this AI take that place, that number would come down to the hundreds or something.
Yeah.
And it's just a blind spot that people have in thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, and things will go wrong, but the idea is to be able to look at the graph and see less things going wrong over time, and not overlaying that where things are going wrong with the old technology still. When something happens with new technology and one or two people have an incident, they are important people. Somebody lost their child. I mean, this is emotional stuff. But now a whole bunch of other people have. We all lose when we become risk averse. And unfortunately, with technology and the government, the government feels more, I think, like it has to protect us more than it really does. If you protect us too much, we die. And so we have to get bold. We've got to make bold decisions, and we have to step up, and we have to open up innovation and open up the ability for people to participate in this innovation right here in the United States of America by consent, and that all of that data goes towards making a cure, both good and bad. There should be, no company should have to come forward and say, we're going to take all of the risk because we're not going to let people die. We're going to try to drive for the numbers. We're going to try to figure out what's happening and how to actually solve these really complex issues so that this is not the future we have. It's created a job for me, and that's fantastic. It's always good to have purpose, but I think we could all get together and say that we'll all shoulder this responsibility. That Liz and these few people don't have to take it on. We'll all take it on because people want access to this technology. They want access to new technology. If you have anyone aging in your family, you'll see whether it's Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. At first they think their doctor is going to save them. Doctors are very important people. I love them. They're our heroes, and I have no heroes, but I guess they would be the closest thing because they're on the front line. But often but a patient will find they'll become disillusioned when they finally figure out that for the most part, 99% of those doctors don't want to step out of their bounds. They don't want to step into areas that will not be legal for them. And the worst case scenario happens. They let the patient die. Mm. Without using any innovations that may be experimental, but isn't it worth the risk? And the patient realizes that they're just basically being handled, that they're part of a palliative care scenario, and that they just need to let go. No, we need to pioneer technology. These people want to stand up. They want to have something that they're standing for. If they're going to die, they want to go knowing that they started to spearhead new technology for their children, for the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. You had a piece that describes Alzheimer's as the 6th leading cause of death, and other degenerative conditions are also kind of up there in those numbers. And your set of interventions has ways of addressing these in the near term and ultimately reversing this neurodegenerative qualities. Are you hopeful that we will not have to worry about our minds and senescence in this regard in the coming years? Tell us more about those interventions as well.
Yeah, so some of the things that we're looking at to treat Alzheimer's are things like telomerase induction and klotho. So these both have really potentially really intrinsic value. So if we look at telomerase induction, we're looking to target the microglia in the brain, and what can happen then is if you restore the microglia, they're sort of the cleaners of the brain. They actually start supporting the neurons. Also in research, they showed that if you transduce the neurons with telomerase-inducing enzyme, it also helps to clear up the tau tangles. So the idea is to get a brain that functions and is cleaning up like a younger brain. We're also looking at klotho. Klotho is a gene. It was named after the goddess Clotho, who spun the web of life. And the gene seems to have a protective effect. So for instance, people who have 2 APOE4 genes, which means that you're highly likely to get Alzheimer's, if they have upregulation of klotho naturally in their body, another human existing gene, they're protected from the effects of dementia at a higher rate than their counterparts. So the beauty of these technologies is to create some sort of slowing, halting, or reversing of the disease. If we could just slow it or halt it until we can actually find the ultimate cure, then that's what we would like to do. But all of the genes that we look at right now are genes that are considered regenerative genes. They do some sort of physiological effect of making cells younger. And I'm sorry, it appears that I did not turn everything off, and everything's going to start going bloop, 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 bloop. I tried.
It's not even a question that your work and BioViva has made an incredible contribution to emerging biomedicine and public health outcomes. What do you think about tech policy advocacy groups, like the Transhumanist Party that I'm affiliated with, or any sort of other organizations? Do you think that they have a role to play, and maybe more broadly, what is your advice to people who are not in the life sciences, who are not data scientists, to best contribute to the conversation and these better public health outcomes?
Boy, you've always got so many things to go on in there, and I just want to keep hold of all of them. Everyone is important. Everyone is important. Absolutely, it's important to discuss the technologies and expand the technologies and get the information out there. So I love all of the groups working on getting the information out there. Now, sometimes I see some bickering in the groups I'm a little surprised about. So guys, get along. You don't freaking get along. What the hell? What kind of word are we building? So and you can agree to disagree with some things as well. So feel free to disagree, because that's the important thing. That's what drives us into different areas. The best thing is, if you disagree, then go prove your point by creating a company and making the technology that you think is going to be best. So I really want to encourage everyone to be entrepreneurs. So yes, the groups that talk about the future and technology and help legislate for change, that is super, super important. And I saw in your group, I think I hope I'm correct, you're having a run for a presidential candidate.
Yes, there's a primary election going on in the Transhumanist Party, and I'm one of a number of candidates involved in that race. So yes, I'm running for president. So if I become the president, you're I want no, you're my Surgeon General.
You have to put me in charge of health. Because I will ensure that we get there faster. Yeah, no, so good. That's really cool. It's cool that groups are becoming that big that they can do things like that, and I'm 100% supportive of that. I mean, I think the transhumanist mission is very noble, and I think it's where humans have been going, and I think that it's very acceptable. It should be very acceptable to most of the world, but it all depends on how you sell it. And so, if you certainly lose a fight immediately if you start arguing, right? So even if you're the smartest guy in the room, you start debating a fact with somebody, making them feel inferior or stupid, they're not going to listen. So yeah, just keep it really positive and keep it really cool, because it's a great mission. And so I'm 100% supportive of that. And how can people get involved? I mean, learn about yourself, learn about your biology. Don't take anything from someone who says, oh, we can do this, this, and this. Go read a paper. Go read a book of how to read a paper. There's really great science out there. And of course, we hope it's as accurate as possible so that we can translate it into technology that works for humans. I think that we have a big incentive, and I think that most people are good, from scientists to average Joes. We all have a place to play in the world, and there's a reason that we're here, building this community. And I mean, there's a million ways to get involved. You can start looking at your genome and analyzing it. You can look at your biome and analyze it. You can look at a bunch of different omics about your body and start to think about what type of technology would you like for you. So when we talk about technology like gene therapy, I don't want people to think, well, that's only for some people. I want you to think, what would you like? Because we're going to get there a lot faster than you think that we are. I mean, we can already increase muscle mass, and that's pretty cool. Pretty soon we'll be able to maybe increase fast twitch muscle. We'll be able to increase intelligence. We'll be able to increase a lot of things. And I think that people getting really excited about that technology and not thinking of it as technology for someone else, and not shaming people for using technology. I think the best way to do that is to internalize that and think about, how would you want to use that technology? What kind of attributes would you like to change about you? And what kind of abilities would you like to have in the future? And I think that should get people really excited about internalizing, what does this technology actually mean? And I think that we can all agree, if on nothing else, that things like Alzheimer's and cancer and heart disease need to be eradicated. And so, and that's where the technology starts, that's where we actually, we have our nursery bed of developing the technology that then will make lives very much more interesting in the future. If you want to travel to space, maybe there's a certain gene set you need. If you want to live in Antarctica or live with very little sun or a lot of sun, different little switches that we might be able to pull in order to make it so that you can live where you want to your heart's content. Do the type of job that you want to. Maybe you want to live on an asteroid and you want to mine it. there will be different gene sets for that. And the most thing that it means for the human population is that we continue to exist and we continue to find meaning in the world. And the thing that I can tell you is that vastly with technology, people choose to do good things. And I don't see anything different coming of this technology. So advocate, participate, and get out there and share information. Those are the best things you can do if you want to see the future.
It brings to that brings to mind a notions around a citizen science. And my feeling is that the broad entrepreneurship and the emerging culture that could add an incredible amount of value to these efforts. This is an important thing in citizen science and home CRISPR modifications, but whatever kinds, even just a frivolous kind. I think it adds something to that.
Remember, I want you to do what you want to do, but I am here because if you do decide to modify yourself with technology, I want you to do it with a medical doctor and with medical researchers, and that's why we're building what we're building. If you do something at home, it could be dangerous. It could have a bad outcome. Most likely, it's going to have no outcome because you won't have the titration to actually affect your biology. But bad or good, we won't know. So I do think it's your choice, but I would like you to do it safely and respectfully with a medical doctor and medical researchers that we have on our side. So Integrative Health Systems is the company with the doctors, we're the company with the researchers, because we want to make sure that we have a valuable outcome and that, you know, whatever you're participating in, it's getting noted down. And I think that in the future, probably in the next year or so, we'll have a meaningful way for people who are participating in their own sort of technology in their own space, whether that's nutraceuticals, it's senolytics, or it's bigger gun type technology, that they'll be able to participate in the repository in order to see if there is any meaningful data coming out of the things they do. But I want you to do things with medical doctors and with researchers so that we can actually increase the cause of you know, human enhancement and health and preventative medicine.
Yeah. And that bears repeating that anybody who's working with these things at the citizen science level, there are resources, there are people that you can be reaching out to. You want to make your efforts worthwhile, so you want to be doing it at the highest level that you can, and that means coordinating with professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, another thing. I think that citizen science, science tree, and entrepreneurship and everything else is highly important. And I want everyone out there to understand that it's really important that you get involved and help move the cause forward for human health or whatever you love to do. And don't count yourself out. You're a valuable person. Whatever your skill set is, the world needs it. Lots of people are now getting into biotechnology and other areas of technology because they're actually needed to be there. When I was just a mother working for an educational resource for the education of stem cells, you know, I wasn't sure that I was qualified to then start a company that would help people get access to therapeutics and then analyze the data. And now this thing is becoming really big and very complex. But if I wasn't the right person, I wouldn't be here right now. There were hundreds and thousands and millions of scientists. There were millions of medical doctors, and they weren't putting the piece together. So if you think that you have a piece to put together, get out there and get that piece sorted out, because the world needs you. So all of your endeavors are really important, and people who are watching this need to understand that they have high value to the world and they have something they can pay forward. And I'm certain that they are valuable.
The highest of this is to be able to inspire people, I believe. And those people are out there, they're wanting to do this, and maybe just that little bit of a push, you know, it has this butterfly effect kind of thing. We don't always know how that influences things in the long term.
When you think about it, you're vastly reaching out to the pioneers, and so the pioneers are the people who really make things happen. And so, we want the pioneers to come out and, start companies and start doing things the way that they think that they need to be done, because that's how you create disruptive change. That's a really important part of innovation.
The last updates on your telomere length experiment was from last year. Are there any new developments or announcements in the offing? Number of my friends are always following what's going on with your company and also wanting to know where they are with their own life extension prospects, such as they might be. Is there anything else that you would say about that?
I don't have any more new telomere results. I do need to do another telomere test. So I think that it's about time to do that. We've been really busy with multifaceted areas of the company. We have research and development at Rutgers now. So we're developing a new vector in order to get multiple genes into cells at one time. We've got the bioinformatics going that will be spinning my data through there along with other people's data now. And then we've got integrative health systems that we deal with almost on a daily basis because that's our partner company. I did recently do some blood work, and so I'm hoping I think it's on the 28th, I get the results from that. I go back to meet with my doctor and get the results on that. So I'm excited about that. But mostly, Liz has just been trying to be healthy and get active again and really enjoy some of this summer, which has been a real treat for me. I've been home since June. I leave again in September, and I'm not home very much once I start traveling again. And so thank you for reminding me this is a good time to do a telomere test.
Well, yes, it's just wonderful to be able to get these insights into your organization and just these insights in general. This has been incredibly informative and inspiring to speak to you. And again, I just thank you for what you do. You're an inspiration to so many people in the techno-optimist community, and it's just been really, really great to be able to sit down and speak with you. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's great, and keep doing what you're doing and keep people talking about the technology, and techno-optimism is awesome. I love those two words together because we should be really optimistic. Humans do great things, we progressively do great things, and people are generally good. So I think building on all of those facts, I think we have an amazing future in front of us.
Yes. I'm very hopeful for the prospects of even the most aspirational of public health goals, and that's owing to companies like BioViva that have been at the vanguard of that. And some years ago, I would not have imagined that my mother might be able to have these interventions that are not surgical interventions or not for her diabetes, and now I feel with every passing year I feel that those goalposts are moving closer and closer in all of these things. So it's nice to be someone like a person in the transhumanist party who's able to talk to a lot of people about these things and hopefully inspire them. But it's truly wonderful to see people like you who are really doing the hard work.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think we need to be optimistic, and we need to still hold people accountable. And so, I'm happy that people check in with us and say, how are you doing, and how much do these therapies cost, and why are they still so expensive, and what are you doing on your side to ensure the survival of the human race? I mean, isn't that really what it's about? It's about experiencing, giving people joy to experience as much time as they feel that they need, and giving them options. Otherwise, I can't express more that people need the right to live, and they also need the right to die. I mean, many people are struggling to survive diseases that there might be a cure for if we just push a little bit harder. I mean, a lot harder. And then there are other people that are absolutely miserable, doing horrible things to their body because they don't want to be here for whatever reason. Hopefully in the future we can fix that so that psychologically people want to be part still, and they want to live. But until that time, we just have a lot of atrocities happening in the world around us, and we need to take those quite seriously.
You know, what you said a moment before that, it brings to mind a conversation that I had with a gentleman named Florian Marcus as emissary for the Estonia, this Estonian e-governance presenter. And we talked mostly about things relating to e-governance, but because they've done such good work, and it's a small country relative to the size of the U.S., but because they've done such good work with integrating all of this digitalization into various facets of government, now they are poised to have their public health service really be integrated with biomedical data science and automation in those things. And that sets the stage for something where the public health service is costing pennies on the dollar and has a broad spectrum of preventions in place that ultimately allow for a life extension of the kind that we've discussed. I think I would be, the United States is a different kind of creature in some ways, different drivers for research and development, different regulatory concerns, but it would be so nice to see us be there as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, Estonia is amazing, and you're right. You point out a very good point. If there were granting systems for companies to push innovation to humans and to push for things like early use and then more streamlined regulations, think about how many products we could be throwing out continually. Basic research is still very important, and obviously, BioViva, we got involved in basic research, but together we can push this thing out. And there are a lot of models in different countries that show that it in fact can be done, and we can streamline the process, and our lives absolutely depend on it. So this isn't hokey, optional technology. This is the technology that creates a more humane world, a world with less suffering in it, and then we can see where we go from there. And so it needs to be priority one.
Yeah. And Japan has put a lot of resources into these public funds, and Japan is not a country so dissimilar from the United States in their relationship to public-private partnerships and their size and wealth and so forth. But
Japan has done some cool things. So especially for like the gene and cell technology, they've made it so you go through phase 1 and you can essentially start selling the technology for phase 2 and phase 3. That's how you keep things alive. If the government and the investors don't want to pay, have society pay. If you have a product with value, people will buy it. And that vastly can help absorb the costs of the problem that we're seeing that companies have raising money for clinical trials. Most companies that are biotech companies are looking for a buyout from a big company in phase 1 or at least phase 2 because they couldn't afford to go through the rest of the trial. This is the wrong way to create innovation of the future. It's not very disruptive if the disruptive people are out of the game in phase 1 or phase 2 of the technology. That's why our system works better. We have a medical tourism system. You go and find out if the drug works, and when these drugs come back to the regulatory bodies, which they will all go through regulation because the idea is to get them to the most amount of people under the most rigorous science, we'll know where they work. And so right now, the regulatory process has a 94% failure rate in phase 3. Most drugs fail. And not all of those drugs were bad drugs. They just didn't know what endpoint to take the drug to ensure that they picked an endpoint that would work through the 3 phases of trial. If we have a platform where we actually have human data going into a clinical trial, our success should be nearly 100%. It should at least be around 89%.
That's dramatic.
Well, yeah, that's something that investors want to get involved in. Investors don't want to invest in a drug that's almost assured to fail. That's a bad gamble. You don't put your quarter in if you're insured you're not going to get anything out. Why would you?
That's very hopeful, that we could make such a shift in, and you know, the again, it's tied to those increases in the strength of the data science, and how all of those other related disciplines, particularly in computer science, can really drive things forward. You know, I look at Silicon Valley, and you know, there's an awful lot of companies that have monetary value. Sometimes the things that have a lot of monetary value, that it's questionable the extent to which they have human development value, and so it's just you know, it's why in this party I want to always try to be talking as much as possible about setting the stage for these radical public health goals, because you know, I was talking to David Wood earlier in the week of the UK Transhumanist Party, and he mentioned that just a small increase in how long people are living and their well-being at that time has radical implications for costs to society and strengthening the marketplace.
Oh yeah, you want to free up a lot of funds. You cure aging, or you slow aging. You make it so people live healthier 10 years longer than they do right now, and you actually free up trillions of dollars in funds. So it is massively important, and so it should be a priority one. And again, we need to learn to work together instead of against each other in order to get it done.
Well, thank you again for speaking with me. I'm almost a little overwhelmed meeting you. You're a great hero to myself, to so many of my friends, and to this community. So it's so nice to have sat down with you, and I hope that people have a stronger interest, not just in what BioViva is doing from this conversation, but for what we can all be doing, whatever our strengths are, for advancing these public health goals. Thank you.
Play to your strengths. Let's work together to get it done. And thank you for the kind words. But it was a stark moment when my son was diagnosed and I saw what was around me. And I have to tell you, I have said this a million times, there's no heroes, there's only us. And so it's together, are we going to change the course of this? And I just so happened to have been in a situation where it was do or die. I do not want to watch my son suffer his entire life of a disease. I don't want to think of the children that died while I was there, and I don't want to continue to see this catastrophe just because we're risk adverse, we can't get along, and somebody's afraid that somebody's going to have some benefit to them that somebody else doesn't get. I mean, we can only ensure that by doing it right ourselves. And so thank you so much, and continue to do what you're doing. I think we can really make a better world.
Thank you. Liz Parrish, thank you again. Enjoy your evening, and I hope we can do this again. I hope we can talk again soon. I really enjoyed this.
I've got to go finish my deck. So I spent the last month after work from 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. resurfacing the deck because people were actually stepping right through it. It was breaking right under. It even broke under my dog. So we tore the whole top off the deck and we rebuilt the top of the deck. And today we're staining. So I'm going to go do that. No rest.
And have a great week.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Okay.